Welcome to teaching in the Faculty of Nursing. Your contributions in providing course instruction and clinical guidance and supervision for students are invaluable to our mission of creating outstanding new nurses for the discipline and profession. We wish to provide you with an abundance of information, resources, and support as you initiate and then continue to develop your skills as a nurse educator. By the end of this presentation, you'll have the opportunity to develop an awareness that you're transitioning into an academic nursing role, acquire an appreciation that teaching practice is a developmental process over time, and also reflect on your strengths that you bring to your teaching role. So I'd like to talk a little bit about transitioning into an academic nursing role and just engage in an exploration of the experience of transitioning into teaching practice. I'm going to have us pause for a moment and reflect, and I'd like you to write down how you're feeling right now as you embark on this teaching role. I want you to reflect on what you're thinking about as you begin orientation and a little bit about why you think you feel this way. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to respond to these questions. Okay, you may be experiencing excitement, uncertainty, anxiety, anticipation, or maybe a combination of all of these emotions. Also, I want you to think for a moment if you've ever been in a situation where someone was an expert at what they did, and yet they had a really challenging time explaining it to you. We often assume because we know how to do something that we're able to teach it to others. And we make this same assumption when we hire nurses based on their practice or nursing expertise. And I just wanted to share that there's a knowledge and a skill associated with teaching that is complementary but different from our nursing knowledge and expertise. And it is this tension that may be contributing to your emotional response. So I'd like us to challenge the assumption of teaching expertise based on practice expertise. When we're hired to teach nursing students in practice or theory, we come knowing what we need to teach. We know that nurses draw on many sources of knowledge to practice: theoretical, experiential, intuitive, ethical knowledge. And that's the what part, so we know that. And then if you think for a moment about why you're here, what motivated you to want to teach, we also know why. You're all likely here because on many levels you're motivated to share your practice knowledge, your skill, your experience, your expertise, pass on your passion for nursing, contribute to future colleagues' development, ultimately influencing patient care, maybe even enhance your own professional development. So that's the why piece. We know that part. The question that you likely have some uncertainty around is the how. How do we teach? There's this expert novice tension and perhaps some struggle around perceptions of your own credibility in this new role, which can contribute to your feeling a little bit vulnerable. So while navigating this transition journey and through that vulnerability, remember to recognize the strengths that you come with, all of that experiential, clinical research and advanced practice knowledge, while also remaining open to your emerging identity as a nurse educator. So let's start by taking a couple of minutes and reflect on a memorable nurse educator who taught you. What made this person memorable? So I'd like to give you about 20 seconds or so just to write down 2 or 3 characteristics that made them memorable for you. To help begin answering the how question, we really need to start from an understanding of your own experience of learning as a nursing student by remembering what was good and effective for you, and perhaps even some things that weren't as effective that may have shut you down or negatively impacted your learning. And I say this because we often teach framed on our own experience as a learner. And much like you transformed into your own identity as a registered nurse through your experience practicing, so too will you transform in your understanding of who you are as a nurse educator, which will evolve from your own experience, both as a learner and as an emerging teacher. So if you're experiencing some uncertainty about what this transformation will bring, by having the courage to embrace your teaching role, you are also, through that uncertainty, creating a space for you to discover who you are as a nurse educator. Now I would like you to write down the top 3 things that you think are important to be an effective nurse. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds. So discovering who you are as an educator evolves from your values and beliefs about what good nursing practice is. This is an inherent connection between what you value in your practice and how that is going to be manifested and fundamentally inform your teaching practice. In other words, how good practice is translated in the classroom and/or the clinical learning environment. Drawing on your values and beliefs about what constitutes effective nursing practice will help to establish your feelings of credibility as you take up your teaching role. For those of you teaching in clinical, you may need to establish your credibility as a nurse if you're working on a unit that you don't normally work on, and as an educator. And you'll need to have some clear boundaries around your role. What hat do you have on? Because you're going to have your nursing uniform on and you're going to be in an environment where you normally function as an RN. So ensuring that you have your role and responsibilities clear in your mind, and then effectively communicating this to those around you, is a very tangible way of establishing your identity as an educator, both to yourself and to everyone else. So when you start to identify with yourself in a nurse educator role, in order to sustain yourself and function competently, you will need to learn to trust yourself as a teacher. For those of you teaching in a clinical setting, trusting yourself as a nurse on a unit you've never practiced on before, this means trusting your judgment. You will also need to trust others. And with this, I'm implying that clinical teaching does not happen in isolation. We need to create and sustain trusting relationships with our students and other staff. And of course, it's an advantage if you know them. This way, when you create that culture of trust, you can extend the learning environment to manage the logistics of having 8 students in the clinical environment. This ensures patient safety and ultimately enables you to fulfill your teaching responsibilities because you cannot be in 8 places at one time. For clinical or classroom teaching, trusting yourself as an educator will come through those everyday teaching moments with students. This will help you to gain confidence in supporting students' learning and translating your knowledge and your experience. And navigating through these teaching moments will reveal the unique learning needs of your individual students. They all come with various ways in which they perceive and process information. And you'll begin to recognize and be responsive to your students, and over time you will find that you have a greater ability to assess and evaluate student learning. The trust between yourselves and the students is a two-way or a reciprocal trust. The students will need to learn that they can come to you with questions or concerns, any fears or anxieties they have. And in return, you will need to trust the students enough to let them go, to challenge themselves to learn, to possibly make a mistake or perform poorly on an assignment, and also trust that they're going to know the limits of their knowledge and that they're going to seek out assistance as needed. Being transparent with students and beginning with a basic assumption that you believe that everyone participating in learning activities is intelligent, capable, and cares about doing their best and wants to improve is a really great beginning point for being both transparent and fostering trust. So thus far, we've talked about discovering who you are as an educator and how this evolves from your experience as a learner and is informed by your nursing practice philosophy and what you value about good nursing. We've also talked about learning to trust yourself in your role and trust your students, and for clinical educators, trusting others in the clinical learning environment. And so the final thing that I would like to talk about in terms of transition is balance. And this, I'm referring to kind of balancing inherent tensions that are associated with teaching. So we've already identified the first overarching tension, which we discussed as the expert-novice tension. And this is the tension between being an expert nurse and a novice educator. There are other paradoxical tensions inherent in teaching that influence classroom and clinical education. For example, nurse educators need to navigate the tension between the needs of the academic institution and the healthcare context or the practice institution. So you're hired by the Faculty of Nursing, which has a certain philosophical way of thinking about nursing and nursing education, and has expectations associated with the curriculum and theoretical foundations that inform student learning. And this is often represented, of course, as the ideal of nursing practice. And yet we teach from an awareness and in a healthcare context that comes with its own culture and ways of being, in addition to exposing students to the realities of practice, which challenges their theoretical ideal. As nurse educators, we need to bridge between and balance these two perceptions. You don't want to deny the reality, but in the same breath, we need to ensure that students are able to critique theory to support their understanding of practice. For clinical educators, you have to balance student learning needs with client needs. You need to ensure that student learning needs are being met, that they can fulfill the course outcomes, but also need to practice with an awareness that there are clients and that their needs transcend student learning needs. So it's kind of this constant balancing act. So these are the kind of paradoxical tensions that are inherent in teaching, and we can't escape them, but we'll need to find a way to bring them into harmony. So at the core, we have teaching practice. Surrounding this are the foundational concepts that underpin teaching practice, which is really discovering your own identity, learning to trust yourself in that role and trust others, and learning how to balance those paradoxical tensions that we just talked about. The solid line that connects these three concepts is representative of transformation, and this is really understood as a process that is continuous. It is envisioned as really transformation as growth that really adds depth to your understanding of yourself, both as a nurse and as an educator of nursing. The outer circle is representative of the phenomena of uncertainty, and by working through the uncertainty of knowing how to teach, nurses transition into teaching by discovering who they are as a teacher, learning to trust themselves in that role, and being able to find some harmony and balance those inherent tensions. So that uncertainty really represents opportunity, which becomes a space of learning. So being a nurse educator is defined as an advanced practice role. So the transition experience into this advanced role is associated with acquiring the knowledge, skills, competencies, and attitudes that inform teaching practice, and it is developmental in nature. And that's really all I wanted to share about transition at this point. Happy to have conversations, answer any questions that you have, and help you to guide you and provide you with support